I'm Professor John Cole. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Resilient Regions. It's a research institute at the University of Southern Queensland. Well, I'm here. It's serendipitous that I'm here because I took a phone call one day from Jamie and he was actually looking for someone else, and we got talking about what he was proposing to do with this, and I said, well, my institute at USQ were very much about the future of regional Australia, and what you're talking about is in the same space, and it's all about resilience. We're talking about trying to come up with business models, economies, industries that are going to be around that can withstand the shock of drought or the shock of floods, whatever it is, but have a future, and with that, of course, the communities that are attached to that. So this is, to me, core business, and I've come here to challenge the way we think about these issues, because the business as usual model isn't working, and I'm suggesting that while we might look at a case study around a hypothetical bankrupt farmer, the real issue is how we as regions, as communities, as farmers, as an industry, how we work more cooperatively, more strategically, because at the moment it's every man or woman for themselves, and that model's not working. So I'm suggesting that we've got to see local government play a role in terms of maybe collaborating with other local governments to get a regional brand, to get something happening which is cohesive but also has the critical mass that single players can't bring to the table. Too often the whole thing's done from Brisbane or Canberra or from national industry headquarters, and what I'm suggesting is that this thing can only happen if the people here are front and centre leading it, and so it's self-organisation, but it starts with thinking very differently. I think Kidworth Station is worth saving, but I don't think the people who supposedly own it will save it, because they only have about 30% equity. They're in their late 50s, and this is a good example of where it's too late. I think that had the Kidworth owners had their time over, they probably mightn't have even gone into beef. They certainly wouldn't have borrowed a lot of money to buy overvalued land back in 2007. I mean, this is a scenario where, if you like, people following the herd mentality, a bit like the stock market, everyone does the same thing at the same time, and the folks that do it lose out. Like a lot of folks who probably had little debt back in 15 years ago, who've borrowed to upscale, to expand their operations, they've lost out. And it's because they are working in a system that doesn't value what they do. It doesn't fully value what they do. It values the land on which they do it, but it doesn't value them or their activities. And that's again one of the things I'm saying, is that we need a different model, and rather than banks lending money to people like the folks that own Kidworth Station, I think the people that own Kidworth Station, they would have been better served these days working with other folks like themselves, possibly putting their collective properties together and looking for foreign investment and looking for equity partners and building a much bigger business. Because I think there is something to be said about scale, but it's not land. It's the scale of the business that matters, not the amount of acres or hectares that you own. The way people think about themselves and the way they relate to their properties, and as I said today, this is a cultural thing. I have family experience myself. I come from the land. Still have a very almost religious affinity to it, but that doesn't pay the bills, and the folks that loan the money don't think that way. So somehow we've got to try to save the heritage and keep the culture, but move to a business model that is going to be sustainable. And that requires, Gandhi said it, you have to be the change you want to be. So you can't just expect government to do it. You can't expect banks to do it. the farmers themselves have to be part of the change, and that's really confronting, and it requires quite a different way of thinking about it. And you know, today we talked about it. You know, you can be a farmer without owning the land. They do it in Europe. Maybe, and I've heard today already, oh, it'd be great to have investment as long as it's Australian. It's got to be Australian. Well, sorry, we live in a flat earth. It's a globalised world, and you're more likely to get money from China or money from Singapore to do something really innovative here in Longreach than you are to get it from Melbourne or Sydney, where they don't want to hear about you because, as I know, the funds managers there, they don't want to talk about Australian agriculture. They don't think it doesn't yield enough, or it doesn't return enough, and it doesn't perform short term. So we've got to find the folks out there globally that have patient capital, that work for the long term. They tend to be Chinese or Swedish pension funds. I have to say I grew up with Holstein Friesians, but you know, I'm an old dairy farmer, so you know, probably the wrong type of farmer to have in Longreach. But we actually my family were one of the families that introduced Charolais cattle to Queensland back in the early 70s. Yeah, it would have been late 60s, early 70s, and some of the exotic breeds, because Friesians are good bearers for large beef breeds like Simmental and Charolais. So I'd have to say the old Friesian's a good cow.
People can create real opportunities for each other, and I implore you to join Agrihive as a platform to be able to explore those opportunities and to build resilience in our rural regions.